The X-Zone radio and TV show is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone radio and TV show or in any manner endorsed by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, Talkstar Radio Network, its affiliated stations, or employees.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
You doing that thing you do, breaking my heart into a million pieces, like you always do. And you don't mean to be cruel. You never even knew about the heartache I've been going through. Well, I try to forget you, girl, but it's just so hard to do. Every time you do that thing you do.
And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and for the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern. And then the show is repeated in its entirety from 2 a.m. until 6 a.m. on the Talkstar Radio Network and the X Zone Broadcast Network and our growing family of broadcast affiliates right across Canada, the United States, Central America, the Caribbean, South America, the Pacific Rim, Asia, India, Africa, and Europe. If you'd like to give us a call, toll-free worldwide, 1-800-610-7035. That's 1-800-610-7035, toll-free worldwide. My email address, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My first guest tonight is Evan Mandery. We're going to be talking about his book, First Contact, an appropriate book for this show, don't you agree? Well, we're going to be taking a satirical joyride in the tradition of Kurt Vonnegut and Douglas Adams. First Contact introduces us to the hyper-intelligent Rigelians who admire Woody Allen movies and bunt cake, and urge the people of Earth to mead their ways to avoid destruction of their planet. But the President of the United States, a God-fearing, science-doubting fitness fanatic, is skeptical of the evidence presented to him and sets in motion a chain of events that will change the lives of his young attaché, who is an alien... his young attaché, an alien scam artist, several raccoons, and a scientist who has predicted the end of the universe. Unfortunately, the parrot sketch is excluded. Joining me now is the author of First Contact, Evan Mandery. Evan, welcome to the X Zone.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am I used to be a lawyer. I'm a law professor now, and I started to write about 10 years ago. I worked on a political campaign, the New York City mayoral campaign, and I wrote ostensibly a funny book about it, and I decided I wanted to be a writer, and I started to teach full-time, and this is my second novel and my fourth book.
Tell me, why First Contact?
I'm a huge sci-fi buff, so it's always in my psyche, and I guess the starting point for the book was a confluence maybe of thinking about George Bush and what type of situation he could have been confronted with where the stakes would have been even higher and how he might have screwed it up even more.
You mean he didn't do a good enough job on 9/11, huh?
Exactly right. Right. I wanted to give him more capacity to wreck things.
Tell me, from a lawyer to law professor to writing about aliens and first contact, that's quite a stretch.
Yeah, I've always had like this yin and yang. I actually I did stand-up comedy for a long time too. It's funny. My mom is an actress, and my dad was a high school teacher and a high school principal, and I always had this like creative end pulling at me, and this very normal, serious corporate type, corporate inclination. But I'll tell you, I'm lucky in a way because I'm very fortunate. I've been writing for 10 years now, and it's very, very hard to write fiction and make money. And I don't know what I would do if I were dependent on my on my writing income. I mean, I'm as lucky as anyone could get with it, but no one can make a living at it unless you're Stephen King.
Evan, stand by. You and I have to take a 2-minute commercial break. Evan Mandery is our special guest, Exo Nation. We're going to be talking about his book, First Contact, when we return to this edition of the X Zone for Tuesday, March the 23rd in the year 2010. For more information on Evan, visit his website, www.evanmandery.com. The X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard, will return on the other side of this commercial break as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network and the X Zone Broadcast Network. Don't go away.
People are talking about people. I hear them whisper. You won't believe it. They think we're lovers, kept undercover. I'll just ignore it, but they keep saying we laugh just a little too loud, stand just a little too close. We stare just a little too long. Maybe they're seeing something we don't, darling. Let's give them
Well, that's what Evan and I are going to do in the next hour. We're going to give people something to talk about. Evan Mandery is our special guest. He's the author of First Contact, and his website is www.evanmandery.com. All right, Evan, tell us a little bit about your book and about the principles in it. And first of all, where did these aliens, did they make a mass landing, or how did this all happen?
In my book, they're very nice aliens. The premise is that they've come to Earth because they've made a statistical calculation that Earth is more likely than not to destroy itself, and they're trying to be helpful. And so, as you read in the description of the book, by the way, it's funny. So I talk about it in the serious terms, but everything in the book is kind of absurd and satirical. But the president is very skeptical of them for a few reasons. They come, they're big fans of Woody Allen, and they recreate a scene from Bananas. I don't know if you remember the movie where
Yes, I
people come off dressed as rabbis, and Woody Allen's like, I said, call the UN, not the UJA. But the president doesn't like it. He doesn't get it, and so he reaches a conclusion. He doubts them, and in any case, he's a doubter of scientific evidence, and so he reaches the conclusion that they're evil, and that ends up putting the United States or the planet on a bad path with them. And anyway, it's a lot of the discussion in the book is about different worldviews. About I think based on our brief exchange that you're probably somebody who works on the basis of empirical evidence and data.
Yes.
And the president's very skeptical of it, as the previous president of the United States was. I mean, it says something that he sent the country to war, on the basis of preying on something. So.
A lot of people would call that stupidity, but I wouldn't.
Yeah,
Not in public
anyway.
anyway.
I try to bridge. I think my book has a few serious points, and one of them is to try to find a way to understand that worldview without calling it stupid. And it's not my worldview. I mean, I am definitely an empiricist. But the fact is, at least if you live if you live down here, there are more people who think like he does than think like we do. And that's a lot of people.
Tell me, as a person, as an occupant of planet Earth, what do you think of the possibility that aliens might be zipping in our skies in little UFOs, even though nobody for the last 63 years since the alleged crash at Roswell, New Mexico, has been able to prove their existence?
Well, I'll say what I want to say spiritually as a human being, and then my take on the
Oh, okay, certainly, and I respect both views.
How can it not be true? I mean, it can't possibly be the case that we're the only inhabitants, the only living inhabitants of the universe. So I take it as a given that there is other intelligent life in the universe, and given its enormity, certainly other more intelligent life in the universe than ours. And then the question is how long it takes them to find us and whether we would be of interest to anybody. So really, it's just a question of whether we're at the right moment in time or not, right? Obviously, it's just a question of when it'll happen. I don't know. I'm interested. You're more expert than I am. I'll listen to your take on Roswell. I'm on the side of it was a real crash. I attached a lot of weight to the contemporaneous newspaper accounts.
Well,
but I will say, on the other hand, I think conspiracies are hard to manage, and it's very hard to keep lots of people quiet.
You see, my theory is that the alleged conspiracy that the UFO community loves to say that the government of the world or the different governments of the world are perpetrating is wrong. That the real people behind the UFO conspiracy is the UFO community itself, because as long as they maintain the conspiracy is in play, they do not have to produce any evidence for their claims.
Right. Yeah, I don't think I love conspiracy theories as stories.
Sure.
and then I have a skepticism of I just think, you think about how hard it is to keep your everybody in your family quiet about something, let alone all of the people that would have to be involved to manage a cover up on the sides of, say, what people think with respect to September 11th. Now, that doesn't mean that also doesn't mean that the truth isn't different than what the conventional wisdom is. And what I'm always very interested in, particularly when you're talking about very recent history, which is much more like journalism than history, which is how quickly the operative hypothesis is formed. And, if you look at September 11th, which has been the fodder for lots of conspiracy discussions, history was written, particularly in the age we live in, where information is so readily available. The operative narrative was written within 6 hours, and it can't be possible to conclusively know something like that in so short a time period.
Well, I use another example. If the President of the United States cannot have a presidential affair between the Oval Office and the presidential John without the world finding out in the most secure building in the entire world, how in the name of heaven are you going to hide a couple of crashed UFOs and a couple of aliens? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think cover-ups are very, very hard to manage, and that's a great example of it. It's hard, but I still I don't think that precludes the possibility that the truth is different than the truth is something other than the conventional wisdom.
I agree with that, but once again, taking into account today's technology where everyone has a cell phone, and I would say the vast majority of cell phones now have digital cameras and video cameras in them, and still nobody has come up with that all-conclusive photograph of a UFO. And as Bill Clinton said to Monica, well, we blew it.
There's a fascinating you're a skeptic. I'm interested in that. That's you're a collector of the evidence and a skeptic or a realist about it.
Yeah, you have to be.
Well, I think so. Nobody has to be. I think that's the reasonable position to take. But there are plenty of not everybody.
You see, Evan, I look at myself as a journalist, a broadcast journalist. I don't look at myself as a woo-woo talk show host.
Good. I think that's the place to begin a constructive discussion.
Exactly.
There's a fascinating thing. Did you read? Do you recall in the Vince Foster autobiography what he said about his discussions with Clinton? that
No.
Clinton asked him when he took office. He asked Foster to find out the answers to two questions, and one was the Kennedy assassination, and the other was Roswell, New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very brief mention of it in the book, and Foster says he wasn't able to answer either of the questions conclusively, which in some ways is easier to believe with respect to Kennedy, because some of that information is embargoed.
Oh, I'll
Anyway.
tell you something. When you talk to people about the Kennedy assassination, and you know, as a young man growing up, I think it was in grade 4 or 5 when President Kennedy was assassinated. To me, that day will never be forgotten from my mind or my heart, because I thought Kennedy was a man of, well, he was a great guy. He was a great man, and he had vision, and, unfortunately we lost him. But when it comes to Roswell, once again, I'm going to drag it over into ufology here for a sec. When you look at all the evidence, or lack thereof, and you've got all these people since, well, Stanton Friedman came out with his first book, and then you had everybody jumping on the bandwagon, and Stanton Friedman, by the way, has never seen a UFO. It's hard, especially when you look at the facts as reported by all the different researchers, where you had the base intelligence army officer go out to the crash scene, and apparently he collects some debris evidence. And what does he do? Instead of going right back to the base and maintaining the chain of evidence, which you as a lawyer and a professor of law, and I don't have to explain this, but what does he do? He brings it home, takes it out of the vehicle, brings it to his kids, to his son and his wife, and says, "Look what I've got."
Yeah, it's a very unhelpful fact. I recall that part of the story, and of course, each side is going to attach weight to it, when of course all you're really interested in is what the evidence actually was. You
Exactly.
just want to see it, that's all.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's hard.
And then to throw into the mix of the Japanese fugos that were still in the air at that time, and if somebody didn't know the difference of Japanese writing to Chinese writing to ancient hieroglyphics, or the writings of a little man from Alpha Centauri, how could they say with any certainty that this was alien? And we know for a fact.
They couldn't say with any certainty.
Exactly. So, am I a realist? I try to be. Do I think there are things in the sky that people see that they don't identify? Sure, that's why they're called UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Do I think that little green men from different planets, or grays, have come to this planet? I don't know. I haven't seen any. And over the 20 years doing this show, no one has presented me with any evidence.
There's something my book touches on, though. As I said, I grew up. I watch and read tons of science fiction, and there's something very. I think my story and stories like it resonate with people in a way, because obviously, you remember from the X-Files, I want to believe, and it's
Sure.
really true. And the question is, what is it in the human psyche that makes people want to believe that? And I think it's a very basic existential thing, that people want to feel like there's meaning and purpose to things, and I think it helps in some way to think that there's more to existence than our kind of.
But you know what
lives.
the ironic part about that entire scenario is, Evan? Theology has been trying to give that to humanity since day one.
Yeah, it's tapping into.
Yep.
It's tapping into the same basic human needs.
All right, stand by, Evan. You and I have to take a commercial break with the news at the bottom of the hour. Evan Mandery is our special guest. He is the author of First Contact, www.evanmandery.com. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone. And Evan and I will return on the other side of this news break as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network and the all-new X-Zone Broadcast Network. Don't go away, X-Zone Nation. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Ken Elliott. When I'm floating around the universe, I always try to tune in to Rob McConnell.
Hi ho there, Trinity Frog on Sesame Street. When I want to find out what's going on with UFOs or ghosts, I listen to the X-Zone with Rob McConnell.
This is Les Corrigan from Target Internet Development. You're listening to Rob McConnell on the X-Zone Radio Show.
This is John Hogue, prophecy scholar, and you're listening to Rob McConnell in the X-Zone.
Welcome Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Well, I just got back from Roswell, where the aliens have been. And if you ask the feds the cause, well, they'll only lie again. Now I'm hunted by the gumshoes, and I'm wanted by the cops, 'cause they think that I might be the guy making circles in the crops. And I know that there's a conspiracy from the voices in my head. Elvis lives, that's clear to me. It's McCartney who is dead. And if the Mars man should come again and take me, I will go. I will take a trip on their rocket ship. God bless the UFO. Give JFK this message. It's the Cuban Army's fault. And I know that Dave Koresh is alive inside a vault. We've seen reports in papers of a guy who knows about a car that runs on chewing gum, but the Arabs rubbed him out. And we loudly warn that America is badly unprepared. With the Cold War through, we need something new that can get you good and scared. Do you wonder just who is warning you of conspiracies today? We're the ones who fill the rumor mill. We are the CIA. I made love to an alien near Roswell last night. We strolled along together in the pale.
Evan Mandery is our special guest this hour. He is the author of First Contact. And Evan's website is www.evanmandery.com. And Evan, did you ever think, as you were putting yourself through law school and a practicing lawyer, now law professor, former stand-up comedian and author, that you'd be writing about aliens, even though you're a sci-fi buff? Did you think it would come down to this?
It's great. It's my best destiny. I'm living my dream. I mean. I loved Vonnegut and I loved Douglas Adams more than anything I read, and to be even a small part of that universe it's a lot of fun for me. So if I didn't believe it, it would have only been because I didn't think I could achieve it, not because I didn't want it. I'm very happy.
Tell me, why do you think sci-fi is still the number one genre?
Well, we were talking about this a little bit before, and I think there's something so basic. I mean, if you remember, which I'm sure you do, like all of the positive ways that Star Trek resonated in the 60s. And Gene Roddenberry wrote about this a lot, about why he thought Star Trek struck such a chord with people, and it was a lot about hope and faith, and of course, science fiction is generally a very progressive universe where, I mean, I guess it depends on who you're reading, but much more aspirational and much more in terms of race and class issues, much more progressive. I think it's a vision of a future that's much better for most people and gives people, I mean, I think there's a lot to what you said, and it also ties into a lot of the same sentiments and basic psychological needs that religion fulfill, which is to feel like you have a place in things.
Yeah.
I'm not religious, and yet I'm like you. I mean, I'm sober and skeptical about the evidence or absence of evidence for aliens, but I'm sure what I want. I want to believe it.
There are so many parallels when it comes to ufology and theology. It astounds me that people within the UFO community and people within the religious circles do not see the connection. For example, you've got people descending from the skies like God used to do, and the angels, and the the good and the bad, the grays and the benevolent aliens, and of course the angels and the demons. There are so many parallels. I often wonder if we created the entire UFO phenomenon and scenario because even though theology has been around so long, it just hasn't kept up with the times, and society said we need another way to look at what theology was trying to get us to understand, except in more modern times.
It's very interesting that you say. I'm working on a short story right now that's going to be in a volume called The Atheist's Guide to Christmas. So I'll reveal my cards. I mean, I'm not a religious person. So when I look at the similarities in the stories the same way that you do, that I can't understand how people don't recognize that at a level of abstraction that the Jesus myth is no different than any of the many other religious myths or UFO-related myths, that it's just a desire to attach a lot of weight and power to some creature whose existence you can't confirm. So it makes sense to me. But of course, if you're in one of those groups, you're completely invested in the correctness of it. So it's very hard to take that step back and look at it abstractly and say, oh, I'm just situated in a different myth, even though it's a myth. A lot to ask people. Sorry.
And in today's society, it seems that people who do not fit any other... I'm going to get my foot shot off for this one, but if they don't fit into any sociological category, or they're not accepted by different peer groups in society, they find themselves in the paranormal. Because everybody fits in there.
Except I would agree with that only, and you'll probably agree with this modification. It's just that if you are a deeply believing, and I apologize if I offend anyone in your audience, but if you're a deep believing Christian, you're just situated in a different version of paranormal or a different mythology. And then I guess if you don't fit within one of those boxes, you find yourself in another one, and belief in in extraterrestrials and paranormal is just this. But this is actually very well documented in sociology and psychology in terms of the sorts of people who are going to be attracted to these types of belief systems.
And there's just not one belief system, because in the paranormal universe, I can't believe I use those two words in the same sentence. But anyway, you've got the Ghostbusters, you've got the Bigfoot hunters, you've got the lake monster hunters and believers, you've got the people who have been abducted by aliens and suffered the examinations of anal probes. You've got the people who have been abducted by aliens who have had their fetuses removed. The expecting mothers have had the fetuses removed from their bodies, allegedly. I've talked to a couple of people over the years who swear to God, now there you go, they swear to God that they were actually teleported to a UFO that is in orbit around Jupiter that is over 300 miles in diameter.
Yeah, I've read some of the teleportation stories too. I mean, the first thing which is interesting is when you say like all these different categories. Well, there are Presbyterians and Baptists and Buddhists and Hindus and Confucians.
Bingo.
And, there are different boxes, and it'd be very, very interesting to try to study this in a systematic way. But of course, the predictors of which box you end up falling into. I mean, when it comes to religion, it's largely determined by your family, and I imagine when it comes to these boxes, it's also similarly random things like which story you've heard that ends up kind of filtering into your conscience, subconscious. But yeah, it's very, very peculiar. Now, those, if you've examined, so I'm just interested in the teleportation stories for a second. What do those people say? First of all, had they ever heard those stories beforehand?
Definitely.
They had.
Definitely, they've all heard these stories before, and maybe they're out of body experiences, and they just haven't. It may be a dream, but once again, they come back with these stories without any trace evidence. Now, how can you get an anal probe?
Have you ever met anybody who had any evidence of anything?
No, sir.
I mean, what do they must claim that they have evidence, right? I mean, they don't just say, I have nothing, so they would cite their memory as evidence, but do any of them ever offer any physical evidence?
Well, some may have little marks on their body that they can't remember getting, but, who knows? There's many times I'll get home at night and my wife will say, where'd you get that bruise? I don't know.
Right,
and I know for a fact I haven't been abducted by aliens, and if I did, I wish they'd let me know, because I'd certainly like to have a conversation with them. I say, well, what did the surroundings feel like? What was the temperature? Were there any smells that you could associate it with you? Did you try to touch it? Did you try to steal something and bring it back?
Well, let me ask you this. So now that I feel I've gotten to know you a little better.
Sure.
So you've obviously been exposed to heaps and heaps of people and information that I would find interesting, if not persuasive, certainly interesting.
Definitely.
Was there ever somebody that you encountered in person or, in one of these sorts of interviews where you had a moment and said to yourself, I think there might be something there?
Travis Walton.
Who's Travis Walton?
Do you remember the story Fire in the Sky?
Sure.
Okay, the lead character is Travis Walton. There is something in that story when you've got all the members of this forest cutters or these loggers who passed a lie detector test. Travis Walton could not be found for a number of days. He shows up in Herbert, Arizona on, I believe it was November the 11th, naked, calls somebody up. They come and get him, and ironically, on November the 11th, there were weird, strange radar trackings from Arizona up to the Great Lakes, where Air Force radar had detected UFO activity. Unknowns sent up fighters from Sethridge Air Force Base near Detroit as this UFO, or whatever it was targeted over Lake Superior, in the approximate place where the Edmund Fitzgerald sank under suspicious circumstances. Now, when it comes to the Edmund Fitzgerald, no bodies have ever been recovered, and none of the life rafts. So is this coincidence? If it is, it's one hell of a coincidence.
And so there, to you, what separated that story from the others was that you felt that there was like a confluence of circumstantial evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Exactly.
I have to go back and reread that story. I'm certainly. I'll say this. I'm sure if you're telling me that, I'm going to find it compelling reading. There's no question about that. So.
But when it comes to people who have had regression hypnosis, I give that no credibility whatsoever.
Do you remember Carl Sagan wrote in it's not in Cosmos, it's in another book at the end of the book, and he was talking about, he said he thought there were three, and I think he characterized them as paranormal phenomena that he thought were worth investigating. And one of them was actually past life regression, and it's it's interesting. I don't say this at all as a believer. I would say I'm only a believer in his credibility and
right.
as it being worth investigating.
Well, let me put it to you this way. Over the years, I've talked to many people. Like I do the show 5 nights a week. There's 4 guests a night. That's 20 guests a week, 80 guests a month, and I've been doing it for 20 years. Quite a few guests.
It's a lot of guests.
And when you talk to those, when you do shows on past life regression, you get 5 or 6 who claim to have been Cleopatra.
Yeah.
Now, how can you have 5 or 6 different people being the same person?
Well, this one is, the interesting thing about this one is testable. If you have, if you ask a 3-year-old certain questions and the 3-year-old's able to give you information that they couldn't possibly be in a position to know. Now, I can't say to you that there's ever been an example of this, but whereas, it's at least susceptible to proof, whereas teleportation to Jupiter, unless you've got a fast-moving spaceship that I don't know about, you're not going to be able to verify it. But, if a 3-year-old could tell you a detail of the Battle of the Bulge that he or she couldn't possibly know, well, that would be pretty convincing evidence. Anybody ever give you anything like that?
No.
Okay.
I agree with you. That would be interesting. You see, I too want to be a believer. I really do, but I want, do you remember that Wendy's commercial with the old lady saying, "Where's the beef?"
Of course.
That's what I want.
Clara Peller was her name.
We ran a contest where we offered $1 million. And this is going back to, I guess it was 1997, 1998, when $1 million was really worth $1 million. To anyone who could bring forth or send to us proof of alien existence or proof of a UFO. Man, FedEx would bring us box after box after box of stuff. We had people who would take motherboards and solder stuff together. We had flying tin cans, you name it. No proof. No proof. So, am I a skeptic? I'm a realist.
Well, you know, there's an epistemological question, too, which is, and I'll say this as a lawyer, proof is a subjective term. I mean, it's a question of what the quantum of proof that you're going to require is. And there are some questions that are just not easily provable. So you're operating in a domain where, you know, conclusive proof is just going to be hard to obtain. And that doesn't make anybody right or wrong. I mean, I'm entirely sympathetic to your views. I'm just saying, you know, I mean, if you believe in God and I say to you, prove it to me, well, yeah. You're not going to be able to prove it to me. But, of course, if I say to you God doesn't exist and you say prove it to me, I'm probably not going to be able to prove it to you either.
There you go.
So it's just a question of where you're going to set the default, where the where the presumption of innocence, where the presumption is going to be.
Counselor, please stand by. You and I have to take a commercial break. Evan Mandery is our very special guest. Evan, we're going to have you back on in the future. It's great chatting with you. Evan's website is www.evanmandery.com. He's the author of First Contact. We'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as the X Zone continues right here on Talkstar and the X Zone Broadcast Network.
We won't question why that ground beneath your feet is flashing red and white.
And welcome back, everyone. Evan Mandery is our special guest. He's the author of First Contact. His website is www.evanmandery.com. That's EVANMANDERY. That's let me try this one again. EVANMANDERY.com. And first of all, Evan, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great hour. The time has just flown right by. But I have to ask you at this point, what do the several raccoons have to do with your story?
There's lots of, our conversation has been so serious, and I believe a lot of the subtext to my book is serious, but superficially it's all funny. And basically, raccoons reappear several times through the book. And when the President of the United States launches this mission, this attack against the alien planet, it's basically thwarted because a raccoon stows away in the compartment of the nuclear, where the chamber where the nuclear armaments are contained, and he eats through these the wiring, and it leads to the crew having to release the nuclear missiles manually in a way sort of like Dr. Strangelove, the end of Dr. Strangelove.
Wow.
Where, anyway, it's a joke. It's all a joke.
Tell me, if you were driving on a highway, let's say later on today, and it's about 11 o'clock at night, all the traffic seems to have petered off, and you're the only vehicle on this highway. You're driving along, and in the distance, you see this object in the middle of the road, and as you get closer, you see it to be the classic UFO. You stop your car, a door opens, you get out of your car to investigate, because after all, you're a cool guy, and you think, could be a book in this. The ET or the occupant walks over to you. What would be your first words?
Oh, gosh, I'm gonna think about that for 1 second, and I'm gonna tell you something else though. I used to think about this question a lot when I was a kid, and I used to love. I don't know if you've ever seen a show called Doctor Who, but I was a huge Doctor Who fan. I always used to say, well, if Doctor Who comes, I'm going with him. But we just had a baby, and I'm not going anymore. So,
congratulations.
I have to hope the guy speaks English. I probably would extend my hand and shake it and say, hi, nice to meet you. My inclination, and the aliens in my book are very much like this, would be to treat the alien like I would treat everybody else. I would not presume that they were sinister, and if they're there, I'm going to think that they're probably interested in meeting me, and I'm not going to worry about it so much. I'm just going to be nice. That's all.
All we can do is hope they look like Robin Williams and say "Nanu Nanu Shazbud."
Well, yeah, we could do better. We could do better than the Mork and Mindy, the Mork and Mindy version. I don't know. I maybe this is naive, but I don't see any reason to believe that if it ever happens that it's going to be a hostile encounter.
Yeah, so neither do I.
I'd welcome it. Yeah.
Evan, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. Tell our listeners how they can find out more about you.
First of all, thanks, Rob. Likewise, pleasant, very, very, very nice talking to you. And my website is www.evanmandery.com, and I have my novels are up there, and I do a lot of research and writing on the death penalty in my legal career, and they can find that all there too.
Evan, take care of yourself, and once again, congratulations on the new addition to your family.
Thanks very much.
Exonation, Evan Mandery has been our very special guest. He is the author of First Contact. Once again, his website is www.evanmandery.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break at 6.5 minutes past the hour as the X Zone continues, live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network and on the X Zone Broadcast Network. We'll be back on the other side of the news. Don't go away.